everybody, welcome back to TSF1. I'm Ryan. It's weird. There's only me. It's just me today. No David, no Callum. We've got off to a great start. The second Grand Prix in, and already one man survives out of the three. No, we couldn't get a full show going on today, so I decided I'd jump on and I'd keep the content going, make sure we don't lose our opening momentum at the second stage. And obviously the French Grand Prix was yesterday. Max Verstappen taking the win. Only took 2 episodes to get that in. But Max Verstappen take the win in the French Grand Prix in what was a very dramatic race for several different reasons, but mostly because you could say there and then that Ferrari's season is sort of over in terms of challenging for the Drivers' or Constructors' Championships. With races like yesterday, it kind of solidifies to me that the season's done and the challenging is sort of over. Now, I know there's still, 10 or so races left. We're just about to head into that mid-season break, but I just feel like with all the mistakes and everything that's gone wrong, that's bound to repeat itself in the second half of the season. And also, Max is just slowly and surely escaping the grasp of Charles Leclerc as the weeks go by. He's just getting more points, he's getting more victories. That's the 7th of the season for Max Verstappen. It just seems like it's a mountain too high to climb at this point, and everything is pointing towards the direction of Red Bull. But we're going to talk about it all as level-minded as possible. We're going to try and have a good discussion about yesterday's Grand Prix, and I'm going to try and do it without having too much of a bias for Max Verstappen. That might seem difficult, but I can do it, I swear. I'm not going to just laugh at Charles Leclerc through this whole thing. It should be fun. However, I am kind of gutted that David isn't here to laugh at Charles to his face. Of course, he's the resident Ferrari fan. Callum's just kind of chill. He doesn't really care. But you know what? I'm loving this because Max winning isn't going to last forever. I hope it does. It's not going to last forever. So I'm enjoying it while we can. And here on TSF1, you can enjoy it with me. So make sure you hit like and subscribe. And you can watch Max Verstappen win many a World Championship while we're here on this channel. Anyway, let's get into the overall race review from yesterday at the Circuit de Paul Ricard. It was a decent race, I thought. It's a track that splits much opinion between fans. Some people love it, some people hate it. And ultimately, one conversation we've got to have right at the top of this podcast is, it could be, let's say podcast, video, it could be the last ever French Grand Prix, or the last for the foreseeable future anyway. It hasn't been included on the provisional calendars for the 2023 season, along with another couple of tracks that we know aren't really up for contract renewal. Joining the likes of Spa, we still have yet to hear about Monaco, but France isn't on that provisional calendar. We know that Las Vegas is going on there, apparently South Africa might be going on there, but it looks as though France is one of the ones that they're going to lose, controversially, because it's the birthplace of motorsport, isn't it, France? And Le Castellet, the Paul Ricard track, has been one that's been on the calendar for a long, long time, and suddenly to lose it, it does feel like you're losing a little piece of history. And just like I always say with Germany, France just seems like one of those countries that have to be on the calendar. I don't feel like you can have F1 without France, and that's the way I feel about Germany. That's why they need to hurry up and get one of the German tracks back. And I feel like losing France is just losing that piece of history. It's the same with Monaco. These are tracks that I think need to be protected, and I'm not a massive fan of Monaco as a Grand Prix circuit, not in the year 2022 anyway. It's too small, it's not big enough to suit these cars. But as the drivers will continuously tell you, these are tracks that have made Formula 1 their history. They guys want to be involved, and maybe they're not as good for us as viewers, but I feel like in any sport, the tradition, the history should be sort of cherished and should carry on. Now, I know not everyone agrees with that, and it would be good to have David and Callum for their opinion here. And I don't even feel so strongly about Paul Ricard as a track. I don't mind it going off the calendar. But what I do think is that France needs to hold a place there, and it should be protected to a certain extent. But we'll wait and see what happens. I believe there's still a bit of time for contract discussions to go on. They need to obviously solidify a calendar, but it's not too long until we get a release of the calendar dates. And then we're going to know if France will be there or not. So will there be much progression in that time? I don't know. The 2022 calendar was released on October 15th, 2021, which means we are only 2 or 3 months away from probably the release of the 2023 calendar. And of course, they're wanting to start the regional calendars as well soon to help with the the kind of impact globally that the sport has. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not France and the organisers at the Circuit de Paul Ricard will be able to extend the contract. But let's talk about yesterday's race. I thought it was quite good. It started off well. Qualifying, I missed on Saturday, sadly, due to the fact Celtic were playing, so I never seen that. But a lot of people going in with decent results, some teams going in with not so decent results. Of course, Carlos Sainz carried in that penalty that he had to start from the back of the grid. The same with who else was it had to start? Kevin Magnussen. Both of those guys having to start from the back of the grid, which wasn't good for Ferrari and Haas respectively. But helped out some other guys on the way, likes of Daniel Ricciardo, who managed to get into P9 for his qualifying place, and some other guys moving up as well due to the fact they were moved to back of the grid. But it started off quite well. Obviously, Charles and Max going for very different approaches at the start of the race. They went for two different strategies. And it would have been interesting to see how that played out. Of course, we had Christian Horner, who came out and he made comments on whether or not he would have enjoyed seeing that play out. And he said he would have loved to see it play out. I think all of us would have loved to have seen that play out. That battle between Max and Charles that we didn't get to see. But I'm not complaining. But there's the kind of the big incident of the race, isn't it? The big incident, Charles spinning out and losing his place at the lead. I don't have any words for Ferrari's season anymore. I honestly don't know what to say about Ferrari. And I don't know what to say about Charles and Carlos. Because not only did Charles spin out and lose the chance of winning yesterday, but I feel like Ferrari, once again, with their strategies towards Carlos Sainz, cost himself perhaps, maybe, probably not, but perhaps, maybe a podium. At least higher than where he finished. Because they decided to pit him when he was doing quite well at the point that he was pitted. The Ferrari strategists and the Ferrari team in general, for me, feels like it needs an entire facelift. That includes Binotto. I think Binotto and the Ferrari team are so inept in what they do. And there was talk at the start of this season that there was going to be a pressure on Binotto to deliver because they've now got a car that can compete, because they haven't done so well in prior years with Binotto in the team principal role, and just simply because, well, it's been that long since they've won a championship. So there was obviously going to be pressure on Binotto, and he must be feeling it right now because the strategies, the team decisions, the points that they've lost this season is beyond a joke at this point. Yesterday, Charles blamed himself, and rightfully so. I think from my point of view, from what we can see in the television, we don't feel what's on the throttle, we don't feel how the car works, but from our view back home, to me, it looks like Charles' fault. He pushes too hard, he spins, he ends up in the barriers, he can't find the throttle, he can't reverse out. And that costs him his place in the race, and his place in the lead at that time. It was creating quite a gap between him and Max. That's his fault, and he blames himself for that. But now that raises the question about Charles as well, because I personally don't think that right now he is a championship contender driver. And I don't just mean for the 2022 season. I mean overall. It seems to me, and you know, you might not agree, and I'm not trying to stick it in as a Red Bull fan here, but Charles just, to me, doesn't have the ability and the bottle to deal with the pressure. In so many situations, he's shown that. You know, Max wouldn't do that yesterday. Lewis Hamilton wouldn't do that yesterday. And see, to be honest, I don't think George Russell would have done that yesterday. I think Charles has got a serious problem with dealing with pressure that needs to be fixed if they want to go and win world championships with him as the lead driver. He is such a talent. Of course he is. He's one of the best drivers in the grid. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But there's a big difference between drivers who can deliver in big moments and drivers who can't. And right now, I feel like Charles Leclerc is on one clear side of that. Now, once again, I wish David and Callum were here to argue my point, but personally, for this member of TSF1, that's what I sort of think. So Charles spins out, he gets himself out of the race, and that means that Max Verstappen goes on to win quite convincingly. Had no problems throughout the remaining, how many laps was he leading for? Like 30? The 30 laps that he was leading, he had no problems whatsoever. He managed to overtake Hamilton just as the safety car was pulling out and Hamilton went into the pits. He managed to get ahead, and from there on he had no problem whatsoever. We never really got the revenge of Abu Dhabi that some people were probably hoping for. But Max played it well. Strategy was going well, I thought. And yeah, I thought that was all good in that point of things. On the first lap, of course, big incident between Esteban Ocon and Yuki Tsunoda, which seen Tsunoda's race ruined straight away. For Tsunoda fans, I can only imagine that was really, really frustrating, to say the least. And apart from that, it was a pretty straightforward race. Some good performances in there. We're going to run through each team like we did last week, but obviously I'm going to do it myself, so we'll talk about everybody. But apart from like the big incidents with the crash in the first lap, Charles going out, it's pretty basic stuff, really. I thought it was good. It was a good watch, but there was nothing mad to talk about, nothing huge apart, and we've covered Charles. That was it. That was the main story. So let's try and run through each team on what could potentially be the last ever French Grand Prix. So we'll start at the top. We'll start with Red Bull, who of course picked up the big points yesterday with Max Verstappen winning the French Grand Prix. His 27th. Was it his 27th or was it his 26th? Let me Google. His 27th win as an F1 driver. And that's a fantastic record because of course now that ties him with the legendary Jackie Stewart. Scottish driver, of course. So good result for Max, 7th win of the season, and a good day for Red Bull overall. Sergio Perez slightly disappointing towards the end, fell asleep after the ending of the virtual safety car ending. Of course, let Russell get ahead of him. We're going to talk about Russell and Checo when we get to Mercedes, because once again, for the second week in a row on this channel, the second race week in a row, I've got a bone to pick with George Russell, and that's going to become a recurring theme, I think, on this channel. But a good day for Red Bull, and as a Red Bull fan, I can't really complain. It leaves Max in a very good position in the Drivers' Championships with 25 more points and a solid enough drive. Pushed really well in the first 5 laps to try and keep the pressure on. Charles fell back a little bit. Didn't obviously get the chance to go on and battle with Charles spinning out the race. And a P4 is good enough for Checo. I think it solidifies once more that of course, how Checo will probably not be up there with Max for the championship this season. There was certainly a point in the season where it looked as though Perez could probably challenge for the World Championship, but finishing 4th yesterday after falling asleep at the virtual is a bit annoying. Christian Horner seemed delighted with another win, another podium as well. A good enough day for Red Bull. I mean, I can't complain with a Max win. Play the song. Max, Super Max. I've spoken off about Mercedes, haven't I? I mean, not Mercedes, sorry, Ferrari. I've spoken off about Ferrari. I've said basically my piece that I can, and yesterday a poor result for them with a DNF and a 5th place for Carlos. Now, Carlos was driver of the day, and to be honest, see if Carlos finished 5th yesterday, with Charles being on the podium in 1st or 2nd, it would be a magic result, considering that Carlos, remember, he started at the back of the grid. That is some drive to get up there, but they shot themselves in the foot again with a driver out of the race. And this is what I mean about the strategy. Why did they pit him? And I know at a point Carlos wanted to pit, but then he overtakes, he gets into a good position, and then they pit him, and he loses all that momentum, and he's far too far back to catch Sergio Perez. Of course, he overtakes Alonso, he gets ahead of him and gets into the top 5, but he could have got at least 4th if they never pitted him. And they never said much. I don't know about the aftermath. I'd have to go and look. They never said much after. I don't know what the tyre condition was like for Carlos, but by the looks of it, he was probably fine to go the end of the race on that set of mediums he was on at the time. So once again, Ferrari, I think, shooting themselves in the foot, and Carlos only picks up 11 points, of course, with the fastest lap, and that's Ferrari's points for the weekend. So a very disappointing weekend for Ferrari, and a point where they were looking as though they could build momentum, and that's another problem. Last week, Charles goes and wins the Grand Prix in Austria. 2 weeks ago. Sorry. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. He goes and wins the Austrian Grand Prix in Red Bull's backyard. You're thinking, right, okay, this is it now. Another couple of good results, and they can now start bringing the fight back to Red Bull. They throw it all away, like that. Just go on. Ferrari, I'm lucky I'm a Red Bull fan, because I'd have my hair torn out if I was Ferrari by now. What a weekend for Mercedes. Pains me to say it. But what a weekend for Mercedes. 2nd and 3rd for Hamilton and Russell. The first double podium for Mercedes since Jeddah 21. Or Saudi 21, whatever you want to say. And that's brilliant. A fantastic result. But once again, and I'm not taking away from the result here. I'm not going to try and flip it negatively for Toto and the boys. But one thing I will say is you can see that the car is still just not good enough to challenge for a championship. Because if it was, Hamilton would have pushed Verstappen for a long time. And they didn't push him at all, basically. Essentially, none of that race was a race for Verstappen after Leclerc's spin. And Hamilton and Russell will be delighted with a 2nd and 3rd, don't get me wrong. But I think they're getting there, the car is improving, but they still need to find whatever they need to find to go and challenge the top boys and the Red Bulls and the Ferraris. Now, it'll be interesting to see when we hit Spa after the season break, what's going to happen with the regulation, well, the floor changes in the regulation, if that'll make a difference, and that might bring Mercedes closer to the pack. But one thing we can say is the car has got a hell of a lot better from the point it was even 4 or 5 race days ago, or race weeks ago. It's looking incredibly better, and that's a huge result for Mercedes. And look, you look at the standings and the constructors, Mercedes, they could give Ferrari a good go, because one thing, Mercedes are finishing their races every single week, even with slight scares. Russell with Checo a couple of weeks in a row now, he still managed to go and get good results. So, right now, Mercedes are finding consistency, they're finding improvement. Ferrari should probably start to worry about them. And maybe even Red Bull to an extent. Maybe not this season, but they are getting somewhere, and Toto is starting to figure it out. But George Russell, I've got a bone to pick. I hate him, honestly. I cannot stand George Russell. I just don't like him at all. George Russell, the type of guy to try and kill Sergio Perez 2 weeks in a row. Tried to do it in Austria, and he tried to do it in France. And he starts crying. They had to get Toto on the radio to calm him down. Okay, George, just focus. You can get him in the next lap. Tell him to fucking wrap it. Just tell him to stop. Like, he nearly takes Checo out the race the second week in a row. He steers into him again. Just the exact same as he done in Austria, and it pisses me off just a little bit. Russell is no stranger to incidents similar. We've seen it in Williams before as well. He needs to calm it, and I don't like him as it is, but if he's going to do it, at least take himself out the race while doing so. Or the season, in fact. I hate George. So that's like the top teams. Let's do the rest. Let's kind of filter our way down. The best of the rest this weekend, Alpine in their home race, P6 and P8 for Fernando and Esteban. Home race for Esteban Ocon, seeing a P8. Probably wanted a bit better than that, but listen, it's points. It's 6 points for Alpine, and they're starting to kind of strengthen their grip now as the best of the rest this season. They're now 4 clear of McLaren, and the only difference between the two teams right now this season, you would say, is the fact that McLaren have managed to find the podium amongst all the madness. But Alpine look a great team at the moment. We spoke about that in the last podcast in depth, and quite a simple race for the two of them. Ocon doing really well to kind of survive that opening lap incident, and Fernando, as always, just holding everybody up, the legend that he is, and keeping his place. But listen, I see people crying on Twitter about Alonso keeping the pack up and causing a train again. This man's a 2-time world champion. He is up there in the GOAT conversation in my eyes, right? And you're wanting to, he's what is his second most Grand Prix ever. We never touched on Hamilton having his 300th, by the way, massive accomplishment for him. But people can overtake, and they didn't. So don't cry about a train when people can try and take Alonso. If Alonso's driving well defensively, then he's going to obviously keep people behind him. So take that. Shove your moaning. Good weekend for Alpine, though, and I'm sure that Otmar and the boys will be very happy with that. McLaren, decent enough weekend, P7 and P9. Lando Norris probably a little disappointed considering he qualified P5 on Saturday and slipped a couple of places, but this is a car that has struggled all season. It hasn't been great, it hasn't been as competitive as it was in 2021, so P7 and P9 not bad, and I think it's a massive result for Ricciardo. Now I know it's only 2 points, right? It's 2 points, it's not fucking nothing to shout about, but in terms of Ricciardo, he needs these points finishes. With all the conversation going on amongst the paddock and the team, any point is better than no point for Daniel Ricciardo right now, and it was good for him to get that. I'm not a massive McLaren fan, not a massive Norris or Ricciardo fan, but I think that obviously you can look at it from a neutral point of view and say, yeah, it's a decent enough weekend for them. Zach Brown, probably a little bit of pressure relief from what has been a tricky few months. Aston Martin, to be honest, I would say a decent weekend. Lance Stroll picking up the last point on the grid yesterday. I was happy for Lance. Do you know what? I like Lance. Controversial. Maybe that's put you off this channel. Maybe that's put you off me by saying I like Lance Stroll. But I do. Of course, I had a bit of an incident with F1 TV in the Austrian Grand Prix, as they referred to him as the autistic. It wasn't great. French commentator losing his job in the meantime. But this weekend, his drive made up and showed that he can be a good driver. And that's the thing. Lance is obviously a talented guy. He's had a podium. He's finished pole position in the past. He is a talented driver. he just struggles in this car, I think, just like Seb Vettel. But yesterday, P10, P11, I think that's a decent result for Aston Martin considering how bad a season they've had. The car looks as though it's getting better. It showed decent pace at points yesterday as well, I thought. And, I think for them, finishing anywhere on the points is huge. So, decent enough weekend for Aston Martin. And the rest of the teams who didn't get points over this race weekend, AlphaTauri, P12 and a DNF for Yuki Tsunoda after that lap 1 incident with Esteban Ocon. Disappointing, continuing on a disappointing season for AlphaTauri. And of course, one of the things that has to be spoken about is Pierre Gasly. No points in his home race. A shame for him, and another question mark on what has been a really tough season for him and the AlphaTauri team. Williams, P13 and a DNF. Albon, once again, putting in a decent enough drive for Williams, not enough for points. And Nicholas Latifi, surprise, surprise, didn't make it to the end of the race. DNF'd. Alfa Romeo, P14 and a P16 for Zhou Guanyu. Valtteri Bottas, a poor weekend. It's been a slump, you could say, for Bottas at the minute, because out of the two in recent races, Zhou's looked the better driver. And had better results, maybe aside from the fact they finished below Valtteri in this race. I think Zhou's looked better in the kind of recent races, although Bottas has carried the team in recent races. I think that Zhou has looked a little better, but a disappointing weekend for them in what was a tough race. And then finally Haas, it's a heartbreaker for them this weekend. It just went tits up from the start, didn't it? The fact that Magnussen had to start from the back of the grid, the fact that Mick Schumacher it's his own fault in qualifying, but he had to start from P17, and the race just didn't go the way that they wanted it to. Magnussen, of course, he had to DNF from the race, so he didn't even get to finish. But they planned out what looked to be a really good strategy on paper, but as soon as that safety car came out for Charles' incident, it threw it all down the pan. It made everything irrelevant, and Haas's race went to shit. They may as well just pretend it never happened and try and get back to some form on this weekend's race at Hungary. The thing is, the 2 races in a row have managed double points finishes. They're in a really strong position, Haas. Their closest rivals, Alfa Romeo, didn't pick up any points, and AlphaTauri, their closest rivals, and Alfa Romeo, none of them picked up points this weekend. So it's not the worst result in the world for Haas, considering how things had to go. Gunther will want to pick it up in Hungary, and I'm sure they will. And we'll talk about Hungary a little bit after the sort of general recap here of France. So in summary, a decent enough weekend for some teams. Mercedes in particular, Red Bull with a decent weekend. Aston Martin and McLaren and Alpine should be happy as well. Everybody else, no points, prick. It was a decent enough race. Rest in peace, France, if that is the end of it. But one thing we've got to say is, where was the monkeys? Where was the gorilla statues, the trophies? Where have they gone? The last chance they might ever have to dish out those famous, lovely, unique trophies to the podium holders, they get rid of them. Why? Where are they gone? It's a shame. They obviously had the big, huge monkey, at the pits, which was great, but what happened to the trophies? Gone. It's a shame. So an interesting weekend as we head into Hungary. Some other talking points for this weekend's racing. There has been points put on the Super League. I just find that multiple drivers have been hit with penalty points by the FIA. So Ocon and Tsunoda have both been given points on their Super licenses, 2 penalty points each, for a total of 6 months over the 12-month cycle. Zhou Guanyu was penalised for a clash with Haas driver Mick Schumacher as the pair went wheel to wheel through turns 11 and 12, and then there was nothing given to Magnussen or Latifi for their incident in the race, but there has been points added to the licenses of those mentioned there. So there you go, there's some news there. And Hungary, of course, comes up next, and hopefully there'll be a proper TSF1 podcast for that, as the lads head out for an interesting race at the Hungaroring. Of course, last time out, Esteban Ocon took the win. Could we? This season is due a surprise win. It needs a surprise win. Now, I'm not fussed if Max wants to keep winning. I'll take a Max win every week, but I would love for a Fernando Alonso or a Valtteri Bottas or a Lance Stroll or just something crazy different out of nowhere, and somebody to go and win a race. And could that happen at Hungary this weekend? I don't know, but my early prediction is that Ferrari will have a good weekend. They need to have a good weekend, and this track suits Ferrari. A lot of turns, which they beat Red Bull in. Of course, Red Bull has the advantage in the straight line pace at the moment. Not a lot of straight lines in Hungary, and not a lot of DRS zones either. 2 DRS zones, both back to back after the main straight. There's the one that kind of goes down the slope. That's the only DRS zones there is. Not great for Red Bull and Max and Checo if they're chasing after so many turns in a race. So I think that Ferrari will have the upper hand this weekend, but we'll wait and see. Hopefully qualifying goes well for Red Bull. I just have a slight feeling that the Tifosi will be celebrating, and that is that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video version of TSF1. So it's technically not TSF1 podcast episode 2. It's technically the first video on TS. It's very fucking weird. David is just lazy. Put it that way. I hope you could put up with me talking about everybody and Max winning. Play the song, play me out, like and subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've enjoyed my recap. I'm away. See you later.